Hello, welcome to our presentation on ancient Egypt. I'm Arya Rasmussen.
And I'm Bailey Johnson. Egypt was a vast kingdom of the ancient world. It was unified around 3100 BCE, and it was a leading economic and cultural influence throughout North Africa and parts of the Levant until it was conquered in 30 BCE by the Macedonians.
Ancient Egypt ruled from 3150 BCE to 30 BCE. Egypt started its rule in 3150 BCE due to the unification of Upper and Lower Egypt. Egypt thrived for thousands of years until 30 BCE, when Egypt and the Roman Republic went to war, and Egypt was left defeated. Octavian, the leader of the Roman Republic, was named Pharaoh, and Egypt became his personal possession.
Two of the most important figures during the time period of ancient Egypt were King Tutankhamun and Cleopatra VII. Tutankhamun and Cleopatra were pharaohs, which ancient Egyptians believed pharaohs were a god and that they communicated with other gods by doing rituals and ceremonies in the temples. Tutankhamun is known for the riches found in his tomb, while Cleopatra is known for her tragic death.
Ancient Egypt developed into one big country in 3150 BCE. They did this because of the fertile land created by the Nile River. The Nile River provided a reliable water supply for growing crops in vast spaces of land. This provided a growing population and allowed for lots of trade. Ancient Egypt was conquered and ended in 30 BCE. This happened because of the political and economic struggles, environmental changes, invasions, and the death of Cleopatra. After Cleopatra died, the Egyptians let it get conquered.
The era of ancient Egypt started with King Narmer, the first king and later to be called Pharaoh in 3100 BCE, when he conquered both Lower and Upper Egypt, and ended with the death of Cleopatra VII in 30 BCE.
The first part of the timeline is the pre-dynastic period, from 6000 BCE to 3100 BCE. This is when tribes started exploring Egypt and settling in new areas. Egyptians found the Nile River in 5500 BCE.
The second part of the timeline is the early dynastic period, 3100 BCE to 2686 BCE. This is when the upper and lower kingdoms of Egypt unified into one. For years, they worked on fixing the economy and food trade as a whole kingdom.
The third part of the timeline is the Old Kingdom, which happened from 2686 BCE to 2181 BCE. This is when major advances were made in the Egyptians' art, architecture, technology, and agriculture. This is when the Giza pyramids and Great Sphinx were constructed. But the central government collapsed in the end due to droughts and economy struggles.
The fourth part of the timeline is the first intermediate period in 2181 BCE to 2055 BCE. After the central government collapsed, administrations could no longer support them, which made everything 10 times worse. But Egyptians used this time to produce their own resources, helping the economy grow.
The fifth part of the timeline is the Middle Kingdom, from 2134 BCE to 2055 BCE. After the first intermediate period, new kings were selected to restore the country's stability, which resulted in more monuments and art pieces.
The sixth part of this timeline is the second intermediate period in 1674 BCE to 1549 BCE. Around 1785, Egypt was losing power and the Hyksos settled in and seized control of Egypt. The Egyptians declared war on the Hyksos. That war lasted 30 years, but the Hyksos were kicked out.
The seventh part of the timeline is the New Kingdom, from 1549 BCE to 1069 BCE. The New Kingdom was the time of the pharaohs, like Tutankhamun. This is also when they got super rich and made golden tombs. They were targeted for invasion since they were rich.
The eighth part of this timeline is the third intermediate period, from 1069 BCE to 653 BCE, when the Egypt's wealth caused problems all across Egypt, eventually leading to Egypt being divided into multiple states. All the states came together in the end except for the Assyrians.
The ninth part of this timeline is the Late Period, from 650 BCE to 332 BCE. This is when the Assyrians ruled over Egypt and changed the foreign influences over Egypt. They also had many cultural shifts and lost a good amount of the economy.
This is the last part of the timeline, the Platonic period. From 332 BCE to 30 BCE, Egypt was left to be conquered by many, like Alexander the Great and the Roman Empire. This pattern continued until 642 AD.
Cultural element during the ancient Egyptian time was the use of hieroglyphs. Hieroglyphs were Egyptians' form of a writing system that served as a form of long-distance communication. They had certain pictures that represented different letters in the alphabet, and they carved it on stone, paper, or anything else they could find. Another cultural element during ancient Egyptian time was their sources of entertainment. They had a range of activities to use for entertainment. They used harps and lyres for music. They made and played a board game called Senet, and the adults did surfing and fishing in the Nile River.
Ancient Egypt has had a huge impact on world history today, like how they are credited with developing the first phonemic alphabet and would later become inspiration or basis behind all global alphabets. Ancient Egyptians were also the first people to use paper-like material, also making them able to develop a more efficient communication system and postal system.
And that was our presentation on ancient Egypt. We hope you enjoyed. Our sources are now going to start now. Bye!